Welcome to another episode of the Glenbrook Podcast, and we're on the road again in Birmingham. And I'd like to thank our esteemed guest this morning for making the effort in joining us. We're joined by none other than the amazing CEO of Educated Body, Phillippa Hardman. And in today's session, we're going to talk about a subject which, as Glenbrook, we're extremely passionate about, and also myself personally. For those who know me, I'm a bit of a wellness sort of kind of addict to an extent, and it's all around associating wellness and its influence within the real estate sort of industry. So, Phillippa, welcome.
Thanks, Sunny.
For those that don't know who you are or
Mhm.
who Educated Body are, just give everyone and the listeners a bit of an intro.
So I founded Educated Body in 2001. We deliver the active part of the wellness into real estate projects, be them residential or corporate. Effectively, we've been doing it for a very long time, starting in the corporate sector and then working in residential since 2006. So we consult. That might be around strategy, around looking at a project literally from planning all the way through to operations and opening, and looking at what should be going in, whether that's a dry gym only or a hybrid model of residential with commercial access, big health club of 30,000 square feet. It could be anything really within corporate and residential buildings.
So before we get into all the detail on the importance of wellness, its convergence with property and real estate, how did you personally get into the sector?
Uh, some funny stories. So I started off. I started off as a dancer. I was a ballet dancer.
Oh,
Went to
wow.
ballet school. Had a job in a company in Antwerp at 20 to go and do that, and then I did the audition for Hot Gossip in 1982. I think 1982. Yeah, 1982. Got offered the job when it was the biggest audition in its day of dancing. Most people won't remember what Hot Gossip was. It was the Kenny Everett show. It was the dancers on Kenny Everett show. So it was the biggest job in its day. So I decided they offered me 5 times the money to what I was going to be doing in Antwerp. So I thought, well, I'll give that a go then. Having never even watched Hot Gossip at the time, I did know what it was, but it wasn't really what I was intending to do. But anyway, I did that. Worked with them all over the world, doing loads of commercials, music videos, and Hot Gossip work on TV and globally. And then got pregnant 4 or 5 years later and gave up dancing.
Wow.
So and then what happened was I ended up with a bad back. And although I still looked the part, I was still skinny, toned, etc., etc. I went to an osteopath who said to me, your muscle tone is really not very good.
Goodness.
So I was like, that's interesting. So I started to exercise, and there were no gyms then. There were no health clubs. All you could do was like aerobics classes, so pay-as-you-go aerobics classes. So I started doing aerobics, loved it, ended up teaching aerobics. Sort of 2 years later, left my daughter's dad, was a single mum, needed to be earning money, and started teaching aerobics in, by this point, probably 1990.
Wow.
And then from there taught Pilates, and then gradually went into personal training.
Okay.
Really, really early on. So I had so many personal training clients, I couldn't service them. Not like nowadays. I literally couldn't see them all. But one of them owned a hedge fund. So about 10 years later, so I did that for 10 years. Very successfully. I was one
And
of
this was in London, in the UK?
This was all in London, yeah,
Okay.
all in London by this point. But I was like sort of one of your sort of top personal trainers, charging anything from sort of in those days to 2019, from 1990 to about 2001, charging anything from sort of 50 to £100 an hour.
Okay.
In those days, it was a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. I needed to really know what I was doing. There were not even any courses in those days. I went to LA to do certain courses. I did a nutrition course in LA, American College of Sports Medicine qualification, because nothing was really around. But one of those people owned a hedge fund, and one day turned around to me and said, I need a gym in my building. Can you sort it out? I want everything for free. It's got to be better than Goldman Sachs and any other hedge fund. And I was like, okay. And never having done it in my life, didn't hesitate, just thought it as an opportunity and thought, well, this is really what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
delivering wellness to very, very stressed, busy people. So I figured out how to do that. Had some help along the way, lots of people helping along the way. Had a business partner then that I was working with for about 10 years. But that was the beginning of us doing corporate well-being management contracts.
Sure.
In 2006, a friend of mine owned a property development company called City Lofts. He was one of the 3 owners of that. And he said to me, go and look at the States, at the amenity spaces. Gyms is going to be the next big thing in real estate.
Right.
So going from corporate wellbeing, we had a number of contracts by that point, including things like Harley-Davidson, other hedge funds, and a few other big names.
Primarily in office type environments.
Office type environment. So
Yeah.
that was already happening. So Nuffield had led the way. They were originally called Tweed Park, then became Sona, then became Nuffield. So that was an existing way of integrating fitness, health, well-being into the office environment, but it didn't exist in residential anywhere, really, in the UK. So I went and did a load of research in the States, which I've done really multiple times. But by the time I came back in 2006, I think I probably knew more than most property developers because we were quite early.
Mm-hmm.
And as at that point, we hired, and we were still quite small as a business. We only had about 8 contracts. And maybe, I don't know, not that many people working with us, and myself and my business partner. So we hired somebody to do cold calling, which in those days was a hell of a lot easier than it would be now, calling up and asking property developers to meet you because you're going to help them with their gyms and wellbeing strategy. One of the first meetings we had was with Neil Ramsdale of St James, who we still work with to this day. So I think we've done pretty much most of the St James projects over the years, in St William, etc. And that was an introduction into Berkeley Group, which was obviously one of the most prolific developers at that moment in time in the southeast, where most of the things were happening. We then started meeting people across the UK, but just as we were going into 2008. So nothing really happened.
Yeah.
The only thing that did happen during that period, 2006, 2008, was we started to do a lot of consultancy.
Okay.
So I think our first consultancy job was the St George project, which was the tower, Vauxhall. When Technogym actually said, oh, they need a consultant, so we put your name forward because we're an operator of these spaces. I hadn't even thought of doing consultancy. It's now one of the biggest strengths of our business is the early stage consultancy from planning all the way through. And really from that point, we started to move into residential. But by the time we started to come out of recession, from say 2010, that's when things started to pick up. And by that point, we'd established ourselves as one of the companies that really knew what we were doing. Okay. And there really wasn't many people doing it at that point. So we were really in early. So for us, we've worked from that period of time all the way through to today. But yeah, I mean, one of the other great things that happened was, again, I don't know how I ended up in front of Tony Pidgley, but having ended up in his office, just me, having a chat. And he said, oh, I really like you. You've done a gym for us wherever the first one was we did. I think it was one of the Glenbrook gyms and then Royal Arsenal. And he said, I tell you what, I'll just introduce you to all of my directors. And he literally phoned each director on his mobile and passed me the phone and said, work with these people.
What an opportunity.
We were so lucky. Yeah, I mean, it'd be very difficult to do that kind of thing nowadays. And obviously he's no longer around. But that sort of introduction and being really, really early made a huge difference to us.
So in terms of the makeup of the business, Educated Body at the moment, and fantastic to hear that journey today, you speak about the consultancy side and the operational side. What's the main pull between the two of them? Is it more consultancy that you're finding is busier, or the operational?
Operationally, we're the largest in our sector. Okay. So we've got about 55 management contracts under management now.
Okay.
So the operational side of the business is we are an operator of the fitness and wellbeing spaces. That is what we actually do. But because of that, we do an awful lot of consultancy. So that, I would say, is very busy. I head up the consultancy with a team. There's 4 of us that operate in the consultancy sector. And then in the operational side, there's 150 people. But effectively, we're an operator. I don't think we could really consult with any sort of real depth of knowledge and gravitas without being an operator at this point in this sector. But yeah, they're both very, very busy, to be
Yeah,
honest. Yeah, we've
yeah.
got multiple management tenders out at the moment, multiple consultancy jobs on the go, including Middle East as well as the UK.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Your experience to where the UK is compared to what you're seeing overseas, how does that differ in the wellness space? Are
We're
we
getting
ahead
there.
or are we still
We're
behind?
getting there. Well, if we look at the States, I'd say their States
They're-
are ahead. Yeah. Obviously, they've done it much, much longer than we have, which is why, we're a good few decades behind them probably. I would say we're ahead of a lot of other countries.
Okay.
Very much so. I mean, we're up there. I mean, definitely. We're up there with everybody now. Working in the Middle East, obviously there's a lot going on and there's a lot of really prestigious developments. But what we're finding very interesting there is that people are now really starting to think, because writing something lovely in a brochure, like any property developer or any corporate building operator or developer, you've got to be able to deliver. So working as a consultant is really important, that we're trying to look at a strategy.
Yeah.
So we're not just saying you need 10,000 square feet or 2,000 square feet or 30,000 square feet in order to deliver this. We're looking at how will you actually really deliver that and where is the value, because otherwise it just becomes an expensive sales tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the sort of the wellness industry, wellness has almost been depending on who you speak to, from a context perspective, it can be bandied around as a bit of a buzzword. When you get into the granularity of it, some people don't really understand what wellness is. I think it'd be really interesting for our listeners to understand from yourself how educated body define wellness, because it's not just about a physical space, is it? It's a much
No.
wider topic than that.
No, I mean, we would look at it really very much along the lines of health.
Okay.
And I think one of the sort of where we get a lot of our sort of background and knowledge and really try to deeply understand the sector is to look at the Global Wellness Institute. But I mean, effectively now, I think we probably sped up maybe 5, 6, 7 years because of COVID. So it moved the sector forward quite quickly because people became very aware of their health. But the way that the Global Wellness Institute describes it, and I think they've really nailed it, and it's something that we'll often use, is that it's the word wellness is looking at the active pursuit of activities, choices, and lifestyles that lead to a state of holistic health. So now that might be by putting in a lovely leisure facility of some kind or wellness facility, you're trying to look at something for everybody. So whether or not you're just making a space that somebody would feel calm in, you might have some kind of trails that you might be building outside, or a meditation space or something like that, as well as your super really, full on fitness facilities. But not everybody is going to go to the gym. It's looking at what else we can deliver.
Yeah.
It might be nutritional programs, mindfulness, meditation. We have a meditation app within our app. Anything that anybody might want to do within their own day-to-day life, not necessarily within our actual 4 walls of whatever we're designing with our.
So do you guys get involved with, because I would say also wellness is how, how the apartments are designed, daylight, the orientation, the ergonomical sort of aspects of that apartment. Does your consultancy side get involved with that, or is it primarily just amenity?
Not really. So we're obviously aware of the wellness piece around the whole of the building, with what the WELL accreditations and Fitwell, etc. No, we are a piece of that accreditation.
Okay.
That's what it really boils down to. And I think the buzzwords that are really coming in, and the shift in the way people look at the sort of wellness piece rather than just getting fit, is really like the words lifespan has been replaced with health span. I think that's really, really key. And that's at all generations now. It's not just people of my age and we're getting worried about getting a bit old and feeling a bit creaky.
Yeah.
And then the longevity piece is now healthgevity.
Yeah.
So we're looking at remaining healthy for as long as possible and active.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
very interesting.
even, I have a daughter that's 36. It's really important to her age group. So the millennial age group, Gen Z, very much so as well. Everybody is more conscious of their health now.
And do you
we all know,
do you think the occurrence of what happened during sort of the pandemic has either accelerated it or made people more conscious about it?
I'd say probably both.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so. As we're all told to live the new normal, it's like, oh my God, we don't want to do that. I mean, it seems seems ages ago now,
Yeah.
doesn't it, really? But
Yeah.
when you realise that you could be that fragile,
Yeah.
it actually starts to make you understand that, look at the amount of people that took up walking, running, working out at home that had never done it before.
Yeah.
And if we look at the stats within the general population of the amount of people that exercise or are members of a health club, that's gone from maybe 10 years ago to 10% to 15, 16%. So every aspect of what you look at now is showing more and more people are taking care of their health one way or another.
Yeah. So talk to us, Phillippa, about how you guys approach space within a building, and it'd be good to understand some of your experiences on, especially considering how sort of long you've been able to sort of be part of the overall industry and seen its evolution over the last so many years. It'd be good to get your view on how wellness is influencing property, but then also your specific approach to a particular space within the building.
Yeah. I'd say most property developers that we work with now do have a good understanding and they're getting there. They know what they need to do. I think the primary way we would approach it is with strategy. So we don't want to just say, if they give us, say, 10,000 square feet, whatever it might be, or just a dry gym, or 10 developments coming on stream and a strategy around all 10 to look at the dry aspect of delivering wellness. The way we'd look at it really is, what are you going to say in your marketing brochure? How is it going to work when it's open? How much is it going to cost? Making sure that it's not wasted space. And then from that point on, so when we start to make our developers who might be thinking about renting out apartments or selling apartments, the marketing brochure, etc., we're looking at the future.
Yeah.
From that point on, once we've got an understanding, we might work on that strategy with them. We typically would be working with them, or they may have somebody in-house that has gone a little bit further already. They may have an architect that's really thinking it through. We would work very closely with their design team. They will probably, by this point, either they'll give us a blank sheet of paper and say...
How early are you coming into the process?
Really early.
Okay.
So it could be pre-planning.
Okay.
So we're working on Mayfield with Landsec at the moment. So we're working really, really early on that. Anything from pre-planning, or typically from maybe stage 2, REBA stage 2, all the way through.
Okay.
So we might work just up to concept, and then we might come in much later to pick it up later. But sometimes we'll work literally all the way through. With the Canary Wharf Group build to sell projects, we worked all the way through on both of those, which have the wellness facilities in.
Interesting.
So it will vary, very much so.
Have you seen much of a difference between sort of what you put into a build to sell product versus what you put in a build to rent product?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I mean, obviously, we worked on the Renica projects, which would be maybe the biggest ones, maybe out of the southeast, with leisure facilities and wellness facilities. Yeah, I think obviously the bottom line is what's going to matter on our build to rent building. We've got a lot of very nice, dry, cool gyms. It's a different product. If you're working on a luxury building somewhere else that's for sale, again, that's going to be very different, and the budgets might be higher around finishes and space, things like that. But it depends, and it's all down to the number of units, really.
Okay.
Yeah, if you've got over 1,000 units, it's a different thing in a build to rent as 250 units.
Yeah.
Obviously.
How much? Because obviously, there's almost a couple of arguments here in that you have to drive and prove that that particular amenity is calling for a wellness or a gym space. I always say wellness because I don't like to say it's
Yeah,
gym.
and
It's
it is
gym.
more the word now.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
We're not only looking at people getting fit. It is around increasing their health.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Improving their health.
and there's then on top of that, it's actually around, well, location is quite a big factor as well, because clearly there will be a cap on what maximum value can be achieved, which drives the overall then operational cost of that building. How do you work with the developer or the investors to ensure that you're not over providing and you're almost creating a burden then to the overall product?
Yeah, it's very important. It's very important to do that. We do actually sell equipment along with, so we do the consultancy, equipment design and supply, and also operation. And I think it's quite important in as much that, not being a manufacturer, we would very much look at what is right for the project. We're not just cost driven.
Yeah.
We are there to look at the project. We would be paid to consult quite often. Sometimes we might be if we're just doing a dry gym, it might just be that we throw that bit in for free if it's a short-term project and the delivery is quite quick. But I think it's very important to look at the costs. It's important to look at the running costs. It's important to look at the leasing costs of the equipment versus outright purchase. It's looking at the lifespan of the equipment. When would you be replacing that? Looking at flexibility, understanding the trends, not being too niche.
Yeah.
HIIT training is super, super popular, but HIIT training areas in residential gyms are not that busy.
Yeah.
Because that's where you run your Group X.
Yeah.
That's where it really works. And it's like, we need it there because that is how people train. But unless there's a budget to run classes, it's not going to be used that much. Ultimately, the busiest areas are freeway areas and treadmills.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, really, bottom line. But we have to have something for everybody.
You're right.
And if you look at the trends in fitness over the years, and I know that obviously HIIT training has sort of taken away from the lean towards low intensity, long duration cardio, but there is now a school of thought, if we look at the trends coming in, that's all coming back.
Yeah.
So things tend to be cyclical.
Yeah.
20 years, you'll be back to whatever it is. I mean, we've been around a long time. Everybody in our senior management team, we've all had 20 years worth of plus worth of experience seeing all of the trends change. So I'd say, coming back to the question, it's very important to make sure that they know how much it's going to cost over time and the delivery. So, for instance, putting in a studio.
Yeah.
Group X is super popular. But again, you need
just
to deliver.
Explain what Group X is to
Group exercise
to the listeners.
So group exercises, classes, basically.
Okay.
So you might have a studio space, but you don't want your studio space down the corridor on another floor, and that might be a flexible space, which would be one way of doing it. But if you really want to see classes work, keep your group exercise studio or Group X studio on next to your gym, within your gym, ideally, so that the space could be doubled up as just floor space, so that you can fold the wall back or have 2 sets of double doors onto the space. Make sure that the space is not empty, unused space. I mean, space is money in real estate, isn't it?
100%.
So, but the cost of delivering classes is high, and running 2 yoga classes a week is great.
How do you manage that from an operational perspective? Because you can't just have someone on standby on a shelf just to deliver two classes a day.
No, it's fixed.
Okay, fine.
It's fixed, and classes tend to be, unless it's a fully staffed facility, classes will be outsourced, and you'll be paying 40, 50, 60 pounds for a class teacher.
Okay.
So again, the studio needs to be big enough that you're not only holding 8 people in that class and you've always got the same 8 people, because again, you're delivering something for 50, 60 pounds for 8 people, and they'll typically probably be the same 8 people. So you want to make sure that that studio space is also flexible, and that we try and always have the space, but that might double up as other space. So that might be a functional area, that maybe things are stored away so that you can then get the holistic class feel. Unless it's a big facility with lots of units, designated studios, where they're situated again would matter. But really, to deliver class as well is difficult unless you've got staffing there.
That's really interesting. I think also what's something that we track as a business as well is demographic. And our space is primarily sort of BTR, the BTR sector. We've sort of been in the sector, since its sort of inception, and clearly trends, what people want within buildings, shift and evolves as those demographics mature. You'll see probably from stats within the Global Wellness Institute that I think there's a stat going around: 1 in 4 adults suffers with mental health or some sort of mental health issue, whether it's depression or anxiety, which is becoming more and more prevalent within the younger generation, which is quite scary, almost this mental health epidemic which is on the horizon. Are you seeing the type of amenity that you're looking to design shift to meet more of those softer sides of wellness as opposed to just movement?
Yeah, it's very important to embrace that, very much so. So, as you say, there's sort of softer sides. So the one thing that we would do, and a lot of build-to-rent operators will have something along the lines of this, but being able to have access to more online facilities.
Okay.
So we have a partner that we work with. So within our own app, we have the meditation there's a little bit like Headspace within the app, so it would be free.
Talk to us about the app, because the app's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's your main platform, right?
Yeah,
For
so it's our
everyone.
management. It's our
Okay.
management platform. So whether or not that be, if we can provide that within our what we called unstaffed estate. So we'll either use that app or we'll buy in other services from someone else to provide that layer
Sure.
of wellness for people that may not be going to the gym.
Yeah.
That might include nutrition. It would include informative newsletters, access to little surveys that you can do to look at your mental state, your mental health. But I think it's important to always have something there. If you look at the States, I did look at some buildings where, again, rental buildings, and it's coming through here now. It's looking at outside, I mean, obviously, outside space being very important, but looking at how you could use that outside space for your own well-being, making sure that people are getting out. Some of the areas that we've seen where there's been sort of like meditation trails, or you might have a little herb garden and places that you can sit. So you've got this kind of tranquil
Yeah.
area that people, it's not just all about
Yeah.
the inside fitness
Yeah.
and well-being spaces. We do have to look much wider.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So clearly you've got some really great spread across the whole of the UK. So you're seeing how things are, again, being implemented in different regions and locations, all of which those sub-regions have different cultures within themselves. And are you seeing, talk to us about some consistent trends that are sort of would cover all of those regions, or are you seeing specific trends that only occur, say, in London and that aren't occurring up north? It'd be good to get some
I
insight into
think
that.
when it comes to the dry gyms, which we do across the country and in Ireland, I'd say that there's a lot more importance now put on interior design. So again, 10 o'clock back, 10 years even, you're looking at trying to keep the cost right down.
Yeah.
That there is an understanding that the space needs to look the part. So whether that be that it might be slogans on the wall, more funky, more cool, or it might be more tranquil, more wellness orientated. And I
Yeah.
think there is more. So we actually have an interior design arm of the business whereby sometimes when we are asked to do a bit more sort of space planning, etc., which is called RCH design. But from that, we have actually ended up doing quite a lot of interior design for some of the sort of build to rent groups
Yeah.
or student. And that way, I think people have taken it much further, and they've got sports facilities, etc. So you do see, so Fusion have done some great work.
Yeah.
Fusion students around, they've done a really good job. So we did a
Yeah.
lot of interior design with them. So yeah, Ventures we've worked with, and again,
Okay.
some really, really nicely designed gyms. So you are starting to see, and that's all over the country. So
Yeah.
you are seeing people paying more attention, like any other amenity space. And the interior design would be linked to work with the rest of the building. So I'd say that definitely there is an understanding of making the spaces very inviting from a design perspective.
Share with us and the listeners then some of the most successful projects you've probably worked on, and again, getting an insight into those, but also perhaps some of the schemes that you've had lessons learned on, and why they probably didn't work as well. I think it'd be good to understand that.
Yeah, there's always things that don't work as well. I mean, we did, I'd say, one of our really early Berkeley schemes, because if they're older, so I think obviously if we turn the clock back to the first few that we won in probably 2008 and probably opened by 2009, 2010, as a management company, sometimes you've got multiple floors. Now, it's fine to have 2 floors of leisure facility, but if it's a large facility, certainly if we were thinking of something with a swimming pool, I'd say from a lessons learned perspective, working with developers, and from a health and safety perspective, you really do need to work out where you're going to put your staffing in relation to your pool. So the risks around swimming pools is obviously much, much higher.
Yeah.
If you can't breathe or having a heart attack or something, you haven't got very long in a pool. You've got a lot longer if you're sitting in the gym. Let's hope. So thinking about where you integrate your staffing point, making sure that you've got the meet and greet. Because if we don't have a proper meet and greet, in some of the older schemes we haven't had it, because we've come in late, and it wasn't really known probably at that point how these spaces would really, really work well. We do get complaints. We get complaints. We have more issues with guests, things like that, more people not sticking to the rules around kids ratios, all of that sort of thing. So I'd say lessons learned, anything like that. Vibration is a massive issue. When you've got your gym on floor 27 or something, making sure again that we do have the right. We sort of will explain to the client. You write a statistician on board. You need your structural engineer to really deeply understand. We might have vibration going 6 floors up, 6 floors down. It doesn't just go one floor, potentially, for them to really deeply understand that. And then again, understand you can't mitigate all of that with soft floor, because it then becomes a trampoline and we have another set of issues. So I think lessons learned, very sort of functional lessons like that. I think a lot of the time, sometimes it's just been a tick box, and I don't really think that is the case now, that most developers deeply understand that your wellness space, whether that be a 800, 2,000 square foot gym through to whatever, as big as it gets, they do understand that it needs to be sized, ideally. What we do have is a lot of data. So we measure all of our usage. So we are able to say, we know that we might need 4 treadmills typically in a scheme of this size, and we need a freeway area of this size, that we'll actually look at making sure that we are, when we have the chance, I mean, sometimes the space is the space. But we would look at making sure that that the space should be fit for purpose, really.
So just remind us again how many locations you're covering at the moment.
About management-wise, about 55, but we've probably installed about 140.
So 55 in live management. So that's so from a data aggregation perspective, that's pretty strong. So from that, how are you extracting that data to understand what's working, what's not working, to help inform the next project?
So with our staffed facilities, we do physical head counts, because we don't always. So if we've got a QR code reader, which we have at our desk, we can get really clear data. We get hourly data. We have in the time they came in, the time they came out. If we're reliant on the developer's fob system, it's not as accurate. Sometimes hard for us to get that data. So we do physical head counts every hour.
Oh, right.
So it gives us a really clear idea of data. If we've got the more sophisticated gym equipment, we can look at the data in the gym equipment for usage, which also helps. But for us to really hang our hat on how big something should be, we need to be able to back it up with data.
100%.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we struggle to get our head around is you almost know there's a benefit of creating this, amazing wellness space within a building, and you know that the occupiers are going to appreciate that, and you sort of know that they will be happier. Not everyone's going to use it, but the majority will certainly go down there and use it in some form. But the really difficult thing that we find is, how do you actually assign a tangible value to that? It's really difficult. You can't just say, right, that amazing wellness space is going to yield an extra, 2 or 3 quid a foot on the rent, or what have you, or we can't say that that's directly going to, correlate to that occupier being happier and maybe take out a 3 or 4 year lease instead. How can you start to help inform sort of the investor and the developer market on measuring that value element? Because I think that's really tricky at the moment, isn't it?
It's quite an interesting one, because it's the same questions we're asked in corporate, but in corporate facilities, which are obviously more sophisticated, they've been around longer, data is incredibly important. So if you've got 3,000 people on site or 1,100 people on site, you want to really, really understand your very expensive piece of real estate, to attract your employees, maintain your employees, etc. And what is that value? And it is difficult. They look at things like sick days, but you can't necessarily directly correlate it. But we would anticipate, if you had a health club membership of 3,000, your typical usage level of 3,000 members would be, across the board, 2 visits a month.
Wow, so, that low?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously someone is going to do 30 visits a month, and someone's going to do 1 visit every 6 months. It's So you're looking at that, or anywhere between 2 and 8 visits a month, really. But it does vary on type of, whether it's pay as you go, all of those things. But in a residential building, if we look at our penetration rates, if you look at a corporate building, you would look at anything from 60 to 80% of uptake. Now, that would depend on whether or not it's paid for or free.
Okay.
So that would make a difference. In a residential building, our actual penetration rates are quite high. But I think sometimes we hear our developer clients say, well, nobody really uses the gym. But if you've got 400 flats and let's say 700 people living there, and you actually think about how many people will actually use it, you really need to be measuring it in unique usage and overall usage. And if you compare it to health clubs, it's definitely higher.
Okay.
It's actually higher.
Yeah.
But of course, everybody would like to think, well, I've spent X amount of money building this gym and the lease of the equipment is X. Shouldn't we be seeing higher usage? But
Yeah.
you're right, you can't really place a value on it because it'll be, did they sign you the lease with you
Yeah.
because they preferred your gym and the one down the road that was £80 a month cheaper didn't have a gym?
Yeah.
Did it mean that they could drop their gym membership but still don't go to the gym?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, or are they really, really using it?
Yeah.
You've also got the community aspect of it.
Of course.
It is difficult to really identify it. But I mean, from our perspective, when we look at the data, they are used. But there is also a direct correlation between the quality of that gym.
Okay.
If it's too small,
Yeah.
you're going to, by the time you've been 4 times and you can't get on the treadmill,
Yeah.
you're
People
not going to
listen
go.
up. Yeah.
It's a bit like some people are putting in, say, a Peloton studio.
Yeah.
Now, Peloton is an amazing product. We love that. But we haven't seen that be successful
Interesting.
in that format.
Okay.
We've got them where we've inherited things with the corporate facilities or and it's some residential developers are doing that. You know, to have 2 or 3 bikes with classes in, whether it be Peloton or another competitor product,
Yeah.
is a great product, is a
Yeah.
great way of doing it. But it's niche. It's too niche.
Too niche.
It's like putting in a reformer Pilates studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's too niche.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting because in my previous sort of guys, it was all corporate led, and there's definitely more of an understanding on that sort of correlation between wellness facilities and how people perform, you know, in terms of productivity, as you say, reduction in sort of sick days, general output, because you know those sort of individuals can be measured. Residential less so, but you're right. You know, it's interesting to understand. It all comes down to how well that space is designed to want people to feel that they can, you know, use that space, which gives them the results that they need. As you know, if there's no daylight coming into it or all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point around well-being.
Yeah.
So I remember, this is years ago, Tony Pidgley doing his walk rounds every time something was finished. And we'd all know, oh my God, it's the Tony Pidgley walk round day, or the directors from Berkeley coming in. And gradually over the years of working with them, it was like everything needs windows. So a lot of the time now we were seeing leisure facilities, they're not in a basement.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they are still.
Yeah.
But they are often with windows. The gyms are very often, much, much more so. It would have been space that couldn't be used for anything else before.
Yeah. Good floor to ceiling heights as well.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
yeah.
Really important.
Yeah.
Really important. So in terms of, and I think off the back of the whole discussion on amenity, I think before we get into sort of what the future of that sort of wellness space looks like, it'd be good to understand as well. Clearly, you guys in the spaces that you're operating are probably working alongside a wider operator as well.
Yeah.
That manages the whole
very much
building.
so, yeah.
So it'd be good to understand how that interface works, and you know whether there's any sort of teething problems there, and how that sort of runs efficiently, really.
It runs very efficiently. We work
Okay.
with multiple estate management companies or building operators, and we'll do whatever's required. So we always have like a list of services that may be required, so you could have from a management perspective, say. So we might come in, we might support them with consultancy. So we might be under the arm of the operator.
Okay.
So obviously in a build to
Fine.
rent, it would maybe be the same people that we're dealing with. In a build to sell, we might be working with an estate management company, LRM or R&R or RMG, one of the big operators. So we might well be working with them, but from to support them. So we might be going from, they might be operating the space. If it's a dry gym only, we may only provide wellbeing services and video inductions and something to make sure that the health and safety works. But a lot of the time we'll be coming in and we'll be actually giving them basically your sort of to-do list and a sort of gym in a box operation. So it might be from all of the risk assessments, all of the key points for the health and safety, so that they know how to operate it. So we would very, very, closely work with that team of people. They might be very experienced and know what they're doing, but there's always churn of people. So, especially on site. So we've done some schemes recently with another big developer in the southeast, and they've brought us in to we work with them as a consultant early on, and then we sit with their all different estate management companies to sort out the operation from a health and safety perspective, so that they are set up. Once it's open, then it would be the induction process. If there's no pool, it would be virtual typically. And then it's delivery of any wellness services.
So how does your app then integrate with the overall building app that the operator would have?
Well, you can have a link within anybody else's app if they want to if they've both got open APIs.
Yeah.
Or they just have a separate app. And I know I know everybody says we want it all to be seamless, but ultimately we all have multiple apps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So either way, really, or they might be working on web-based Dwellent or something like that, in which case there's just a link.
Yeah, pretty seamless then in terms of its interaction.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about sort of wellness and how it's it's moving, ebbing and flowing overseas. The US, as you say, clearly the leaders in the market and probably will continue to be for some time. What sort of trend are you seeing in the US that probably aren't in the UK yet, especially in sort of more residential type of environments?
Because
they can go pretty wacky out there, right?
Yeah, and they've also got they've got some big multifamily housing schemes. With everything in that you can imagine. But again, it's the volume of units really in order to be able to afford to do it. I think when we were on the panel together last time, and Michael Harrington was on the panel with us from Related Argent. I think his key point was, again, let's not go too niche. So I must say I have looked at an awful lot of buildings in the US. If you look at the wellness industry as it is, the trends that come in, so for instance, a hot and cold, making sure now, I haven't...
The cold plunge.
Yeah, exactly. Adding the cold in. Yeah. So, because everything we've consulted on that's opening up now was consulted on probably 5-6 years ago, we haven't really pushed the cold.
Interesting.
Yeah, so now anything we're doing, we're pushing the cold, so to combine the cold with the heat.
Yeah.
We've always got showers, so you can use the cold, but it's not with the really cold.
Yeah.
But I'd see that that's definitely coming. So if I look in the US, they're ahead because they're that little bit ahead of the curve. I touched on reformer Pilates, again, huge buzz thing at the moment. But again, you're never going to be able to deliver sort of 6 to 10 people in a reformer class and quantify the numbers won't add up to use that studio. But we do have 2 or 3 reformers where we can run small group X, or might have one for one-on-one. So looking at the trends, so I'm seeing that coming forward. But flexibility, it's the same for all amenity spaces, isn't it? Outside space. Okay. We don't really see outside space classes work brilliantly.
Is that just the weather, because of the weather?
Probably. I think it's the UK. When we're working in the Middle East, I must say, we've got a lot of outdoor amenity, which is lovely. It's like resort stuff. It's really beautiful. But very, very different. But I think largely for the weather. But you can deliver some classes outside, but again, it's all just going to come in at a cost.
Absolutely. I'm always quite intrigued to see, what seems to be buzzing, especially in the US. And I think, with the social media hype that we've got today, things can take traction probably, and they die off quite quickly. And I think, the Wim Hof breathing's one that exactly. Obviously getting on top of, and all the rest of it.
Actually, it's a very good point. So if we look at what we deliver, we deliver events every 2 to 3 months, which is the things that we can charge, we can pay a little bit more for. Okay. So not just an average class.
Yeah,
that is all around what's current. So as you say, it's breath, it's sleep workshops, it's recovery. It's one of the most popular things we do is puppy yoga.
Yeah,
we're soon to introduce kitty yoga.
Really? Goodness
I
me.
know there's bad feeling around it sometimes, but we make sure that we go to the companies that have the best reputation.
Yeah.
And honestly, they're sold out within 30 minutes.
Wow.
So they're all booked up literally within 30 minutes.
Goodness me.
Oh God, it's so cute. I mean, there's not much yoga going on. It's more cuddles that go on.
Okay.
But I mean, for me, that's like an amazing sense of well-being, having the little
Yeah.
cuties there,
Yeah.
the cuddle. But yeah, it's you're completely right. It is understanding that we can deliver those things. It's very hard, within the app. There's a lot of articles that we'll be sending out around that kind of wellness. So we can read about it, but delivering it is more expensive because the practitioners are more expensive. So the way we would do that is on a quarterly, 2-monthly or quarterly basis.
Okay.
And education and understanding cortisol levels and what the effect, the really, really important effect the breath has on that.
Well, I think it ties into, again, we've got the future generations are going to be very anxious generations, and how that impacts on stress and that recovery piece is going to become more and more important. And then you start to look into, well, actually, do these amenity spaces, residential buildings, start to converge with more spa type, facilities, infrared saunas? And I think it's very interesting on how it's evolving and morphing, isn't it, really?
Yeah, if we look at the trends at the moment, you've got your hot and cold.
Yeah.
So you'll have studios opening up now with maybe a movement studio and a hot and cold, individual pods. I was doing some work looking at Miami and New York recently on another wellness company that's a commercial entity called The Well, and looking at what they're doing. And that's interesting. That, again, it's a lot of recovery, a lot of wellness, and understanding heat, understanding cold, understanding movement around health and longevity, and feeling better, not just us all getting fit. I mean, I know like most of the guys in our senior management team now are very much around. I mean, they're probably most of them in their 40s and a couple in their 50s, but they're like, oh my God, I'm doing 30 minutes stretching in the gym. These are guys that they'll be doing their workouts, they're playing football and all of the hip training as well, but they're like, oh my God, I'm stiff. The things that, people are realizing, and then the hot and cold is coming.
But it's an education bit as well, isn't it? People have always assigned sweat to, working out and doing, and then trying to, being fit, but actually you could get someone who improves their sleep performance and their output could be as equally as, beneficial than would it be if they go for a 5K run, which might not be for them. So
I think the understanding of sleep is, that is super current. And I've mentioned before with my daughter, if I had said to my daughter to do meditation or all of the things that she does from an exercise perspective 10 years ago, she would have thought I was nuts. I mean, it would have been like, Mum, you're just an exercise freak. And it's literally part of her life, along with most of the people she knows. I mean, it is just what you integrate. They understand stress. They understand what they're doing to their bodies by working hard and long hours. They know they have to look after themselves. I think that's the real and it's not just there, it's the younger generation.
Absolutely.
Even people coming into really big jobs now at that sort of 25 years old, they're like, I don't want to work those hours. People think twice.
Change in priority, isn't there?
There is a definite change in priority, which is good because businesses will have to function differently. I mean, we don't send emails out. We have a rule.
Post a certain time.
And I was the worst culprit probably because it's in my head. I'd send it.
Same.
But now we think, unless it's an emergency, anything else can work to work hours. 8:30. And it's important. It's important. The operations team, it's much harder because we're open 7 days a week till 11 o'clock at night. It's same with any build-to-rent operator or building operator. It's a bit different, but effectively people do shift work out of those hours so that they're, other people get time off. They're not constantly change their email, and most businesses are trying to work in that way.
I'm reading a really interesting book at the moment called Slow Productivity by Carl Newport. It's fantastic, and it just talks about how sort of, as a sort of generation from the setting we've had from industrialization, factory settings to now almost sort of more professional, service-led work, we're used to measuring performance on output, things occurring, when actually some of the best work's done in silence and at a very slower pace. And I think it's a big cultural shift for a lot of employers to start to understand that, to get the best out of their people.
Yeah.
Efficiency over, frequent busyness, which actually is quite inefficient in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, and very, very much dependent on the role. I think,
Yeah.
when you've got a big chunky piece of work to do, like any business,
Yeah.
the day-to-day gets thrown in all the time and you're not really concentrating, and that creates the stress. It's too
does.
much.
Yeah.
Too many different things at one time
Yeah.
is what increases anxiety levels.
Definitely. So we're going to sort of pivot slightly from sort of educated body, because I think one of the key things, and we spoke about it before we got into the podcast, that I really wanted to get into is just you as a female leader and a CEO of a very successful company. I think that's an inspiration, and I think we need to understand more about that. But also, it'd be good to get your view as to why real estate really struggles to attract, females into the industry, and perhaps some of the things that sort of wider employers need to think about changing to make that not the common occurrence, really. So it'd be good to get your thoughts into that.
Yeah. I have to say, it's something I never used to really think much about, being a woman that started a business and with a job title and stuff, until we were employing more and more people. And then when we were interviewing women, by the time they'd been offered the job and stuff, people would come to me and say, I really wanted to work for a female-led business. And they're young, they're early 20s, a lot of these women. And I realize it's so important.
Yeah.
It is very important to be, recognize the fact that sometimes it's a bit harder for women at times, and much as it shouldn't be, but it can be. And the fitness industry is no different to the real estate industry, actually. So you have a lot of female class teachers and maybe personal trainers.
Okay.
But operationally, on the gym floor, on the front of house, maybe more so. But again, it's more male led, which is really interesting, because I'm like often like, why have we not got more women? At the moment we're actually at about 35% women on our work on the floor, what we call our operational team, and we're at 50% at senior management, which is great.
That's brilliant.
Because at one point it was just me.
Wow.
With a load of boys.
Goodness me.
Exactly. But no, we've worked hard at that, and we've got some very good women. But there's a lack of women for some strange reason. Again, I don't know if it's maybe, especially operationally, it's long hours. But I mean, you could say that about any job, and it's not just because people want to be doing the school run. People do the school run and go back to work, don't they? They've been really, especially now since COVID, you can do the school run and then just work a little bit later.
Yeah.
But
so do you think a deterrent is that lack of flexibility, perhaps in roles?
No, I think it's wrong to say that, really.
Okay.
I just think, it's not only women that do things like that, is it? Men do their share now.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. I mean, it's a question across the board, really, isn't it, in lots of sectors?
It's something that we're grappling with as a business as well. It's really, really difficult. But I think your point is quite interesting, in that if someone sees someone similar to them in a senior position, they're probably more likely to be attracted to that particular business.
And I just
because they
hadn't
can
sort of
see a path
realised.
on how that person's got there.
Yeah.
Which I think is really important.
And I think, like my generation, I must say, the greatest respect to all of these very nice men that I work with, but working with the sort of older generation of men would probably have been less used to women coming in and thinking they know it all.
Yeah.
Maybe had to work a little bit harder. I don't think that's really the case now.
Yeah.
I would say it's very different, but certainly most of the time. And I think once you've got, in our position, I think once you've established yourself and you've got the track record, people don't really pay much attention.
Yeah.
But from my experience now, I know that's not the case for a lot of women. I'm really, really aware of it, acutely aware of it. But things are shifting, and will get better and better.
Yeah. And I think, as you say again, it will change generationally.
Yeah.
I think there's a big acceptance as well, where people are judged as a person.
Yeah.
And for the capability that they have, irrespective of whether they're male or female.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
We run our ED&I group quarterly, and anybody can come to that within the business, and that is really important. And we really listen. and that's what we're there for. These groups are there for us to hear what people have to say within
Sure.
our business. And we do have 20-something-year-old women still saying they feel they're sort of marginalised by men of their age group, which I must say I was really disappointed to hear, like, quite how much they were really struggling. Now, why I'm surprised, I don't know really, but you kind of hope that from 30, 40 years ago, when we were starting out, I was starting out, that things have moved on, and it has largely, but it's still not completely the case. And I really feel for them. They're, maybe perceived badly because they have a lot to say, and they're right to have a lot to say. So for us, it's the forum for us to discuss it and see what we need to do to support, etc.
Absolutely, very important, very important. Moving to you personally. So as a CEO, female leader with a lot of responsibility and a very busy diary, I think, again, it'd be very good to understand how you manage yourself and what you do outside of the working window to keep yourself balanced, to make sure you're doing the best you can do.
Well, it's funny. My brother said to me yesterday, I haven't been very well. I had a few months of not feeling too good. I had something going on. And I took some time out. So I was only doing certain jobs, and the senior management team were all doing what they, we've got a fantastic senior management team, really, really good. And I've always felt, oh my God, it couldn't work without me. It can work without me.
In your head,
which I have to say, I was delighted to find out. But it's very funny because my brother said to me yesterday, I was on my way out, and I'm going to Birmingham tomorrow to do a podcast. And he said, you're meant to be recovering. You're meant to be feeling, taking time out for yourself. I'm like, he said, you talk about wellness, and it's like, you're not doing it. Now, I do it because I exercise the whole time. I make sure I'm in bed at the right time. I have a nutritionist. I use a coach. I do breath work, all of those things. But I am somebody that likes to be on the go. And even that is like trying to stop. My personality is very much that I just say yes. So what I've done over the last few years now is, and I try and work only in working hours. I mean, there were definitely years where I worked 7 days a week. It's not easy to start a business that is successful. And it took decades, took a very long time. So from my perspective, I will make sure that, I suppose, I think very carefully about my stress levels. I do struggle with stress at times. I think I just like to take on a lot and think I can. Probably I can, but at the expense of my own health and my own time. And I think we need to practice what we preach. So I am trying very hard
to slow down, perhaps.
To practice more of what I preach. I certainly do the physical, and I have awareness about everything, but we can all get better. It's very easy. And I think for everybody, it's very easy. You might do it for a month and, get to a point. But I mean, even in my obviously just being older than maybe a lot of the people that are around starting out work or in the middle of their careers now, we had 3 friends in our close friendship group in the fitness and wellness industry last summer, all died in a month of a heart attack. And they were all early mid-50s fit and healthy people with no heart conditions. And that made us all go, wow, we need to take stock. This is ridiculous. Putting ourselves under pressure when really maybe we don't need to. Just taking stock and making sure that the time scales we allow ourselves to deliver things, etc., should be a little bit more lenient. Really starting to think more carefully about what we're doing, how we're doing it.
So have you had, obviously, that occurrence of those individuals unfortunately passing away, how have you then taken that on board to manage sort of the wider team? What have you put into place to ensure that you're almost protecting them of those sort of levels? Because some stress is good.
You become more efficient by pushing yourself, like anything. It's like running on a treadmill, getting better. You've got to stretch your ability. Senior management team, we've been quite careful around what we do. We've got more people. We've got 11 people running the business, so from director to senior management. As far as I think what the operational team have looked at is making sure that their team are covered over weekends, that they don't all, it's very easy for the manager when something's gone wrong over the weekend or they need some support on something, just to call their regional, that they call the right region. They might be calling a different regional, making sure that people get downtime. Making sure there's support. We restructured the whole of the operational business probably 18 months ago now. It took 2.5 years. So we restructured everything from the ground up, every piece of paperwork, every layer of training, the platform we operate through, and that has helped a lot, really helped a lot. So we have very, very, very clear systems and processes.
Okay.
And again, that leaves, there's no ambiguity.
Yeah.
If anybody needs anything, they know where it is. We've got structured ways of training, structured ways of support. Anything we can do to make things run better,
Yeah.
I think will take away some of the stress, rather like, kind of like, oh my God, what do I do now? It's like, right, you log it here. It'll be picked up on this day by this person. This is the process you'll go through.
Yeah.
So, and it's like lots of businesses. I mean, we work with build-to-rent operators that have grown quickly, and they're all of a sudden in exactly the same position. And I always think it's us because we're still a relatively small business compared to these large developers. I just think it's just us. But, at some point you grow and all of a sudden your processes and your ways of operating aren't fit for purpose anymore.
Yeah, well, they've been outgrown, haven't they?
Yeah, they've been outgrown, and you have to stop.
Yeah.
So we did that, and that's helped. I think that's helped. It's helped hugely.
Okay.
So that we could take the next layer of growth without pulling everybody out of shape.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And we could double in size now with the systems and processes we've got, which is what we needed to do. So I think that helps support the teams on a day-to-day.
But that's come from you though as well, right? Like you've got to give that leadership and that direction.
I mean, it was my way of saying the senior management team are so good. I really don't need to be doing this anymore.
Yeah.
But I built it. I understood it. I learned it all, made it all up as we went along, learnt the industry that wasn't really existing, real estate, wellness.
Yeah.
And then myself with our head of health and safety did that with a lot of other people's input.
Yeah.
And then everybody else, once it was built, everybody else just, they managed it. I've not managed it. The whole team manage it.
Yeah.
It's very well done. They've done a great job.
So one probably final question for you before we close is, we touched upon the opportunity of wellness in real estate over the next sort of 10 years, which is quite phenomenal really when you go back to that stat that you mentioned.
Yeah.
For anyone new who is looking to come into the sector, to grasp that opportunity, what would your advice be to them, irrespective of which part of the sector they come into?
Yeah, I mean, I think our strength really is the consultancy. So we have really, really deep understanding of it, particularly in residential, I mean, corporate as well. And I think I mentioned on the last panel that we see this sort of merge of the corporate wellness and the residential wellness industries. I mean, there are more people doing what we do now. I suppose it's not directly transferable. The fitness industry, obviously, everything comes from there, but it's not necessarily directly transferable. Just putting in a gym or doing gym design or something is only a piece of it, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge growth area, as I talked about. I mentioned the stats. I have written them down. I don't get them wrong. But if we look at what the Global Wellness Institute is saying, that in their report from this year, which is called the Wellness Real Estate Market Growth 2019 to 2023, was published this year, there's a projected compound annual growth rate of 16% over the next 5 years.
Wow.
Global sector, I know it's huge, isn't it? The global sector is worth 440 billion today and forecast to hit nearly 1 trillion in 2029. So wellness is outperforming most sectors. Now, obviously, wellness, the piece that we do, which is the delivery and the active, so-called active and mental wellness, is one piece. Obviously, the wellness of the building, building and the accreditations for the buildings is super important, which has risen from 2017 to 2023 40-fold. So obviously that will be applicable to funding, etc.
Yeah, of course.
But I think just knowing that the wellness industry is something that we as fitness industry passionate people truly believe in, keeping active, keeping well, the sort of longevity, health span that we've talked about, but understanding that it's just going to explode. It's exciting. It's really exciting.
It is.
Yeah,
Very much so.
Really exciting, because it's what I mean, when we started off in the beginning, it's like I exercised every day my whole life from the age of 11 when I was dancing. I used to dance twice a week.
Yeah.
From at least 10, 11, I was training 6 days a week to be a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
It's like, it's who I am.
It's built within you, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
I mean, my business partner is he plays football all the time. You know, all of us train.
Yeah.
And believe in health.
Health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And expanding the message.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, Phillippa, it's been a fantastic conversation. We're really, really glad that you were able to join us today.
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity.
Tons that we've been through. For those who want to know more and would like to get in touch, where's the best place to find you?
Educated Body.
Okay.
So the website, or ph@educatedbody.com.
Fantastic. Again, thanks again, Phillippa. It's been a cracking episode, and with the Glenbrook Podcast.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks very much.